Chapter 8 Flag of the Fat Lady. In no time at all, defense against the dark arts had become most people's favorite class. Only Draco Malfoy and his gang of Slytherin had anything bad to say about Professor Lupin. "Look at the state of his robes," Malfoy would say in a loud whisper as Professor Lupin passed. "He dresses like our old house elf." But no one else cared. The Professor Lupin's robes were patched and frayed. His next few lessons were just as interesting as the first. After Bogarts, they studied red cups, nasty little goblin-like creatures that looked wherever the nasty little goblin-like creatures that looked wherever there has been bloodshed in the dungeons of Castor and the portals of deserted battlefields, waiting to bludgeon those who had got lost. From red caps, they moved on to kappas, crappy water drewers that looked like scaly mummies, with webbed hands itching to drench unwitting water in their ponds. Harry only wished he was happy with some of his other class. Worst of all was potions. Snape was in a particularly vintage type mood these days, and no one was in any doubt why. The story of the Boggart assuming Snape's shape, and the way that Neville had dressed in his grandmother's clothes, had traveled through the school like wildfire. Snape didn't seem to find it funny. His eyes flashed majestically at the very mention of Professor Lupin's name, and he was buying Neville worse than ever. Harry was also growing to death the hours he spent in Professor Trelawney's slouching tower room, deciphering lopsided shapes and symbols, trying to ignore the way Professor Trelawney's enormous eyes filled with tears every time she looked at him. He couldn't like Professor Trelawney, even thought she was treated with respect bordering on revenge by many of the class. Parvati Patil and Lavender Brown had taken to haunting Professor Trelawney's tower room at lunchtimes, and always returned with admirably on the didn't. They had also started using Hugh's voice whenever they spoke to Harry, as thought he was on his deathbed. Nobody really liked care of magical creatures which, after the action-packed first class, had become extremely dull. Hagrid seemed to have lost of his confidence. They were now spending lesson after class learning how to look after flubberworms, which had to be some of the most boring creatures in existence. "Why would anyone bother looking after them?" said Ron, after yet another hour of poking shredded lanterns down the flubberworms' slimy throats. At the start of October, however, Harry had some time else to occupy him. Something so enjoyable it made up from his unsatisfactory class. The Quidditch season was approaching, and Oliver Wood, captain of the Gryffindor team, called a meeting one Thursday evening to discuss tactics for the new season. There were 7 people on the Quidditch team, 3 chasers, whose job it was to score goals by putting the quaffle, a red football-sized ball, through one of the 50-foot high hoops at each end of the pitch, 2 beaters, who were equipped with heavy bats to repel the flushers, 2 heavy black balls who defended the glow post, and the seeker, who had the hardest job of all, that of catching the golden snitch, a tiny winged walnut-sized ball, whose capture ended the game and earned the seeker's team an extra 115 points. Oliver Wood was a barely 17 years old, now in his 7th and final year at Hogwarts. There was a quiet sort of desperation in his voice as he addressed his 6 fellow team members in the chilly changing rooms on the edge of the dark kinging Quidditch pitch. "This is our last chance, my last chance to win the Quidditch Cup," he told them, strutting up and down in front of them. "I will be leaving at the end of this year. I will never get another shot at it. Gryffindor haven't won for 7 years now." "Okay, so we are had the worst luck in the world," injurious. "Then the tournament was getting cold of the last year," Ursvouched. Astonished, the memory though brought a lump to his throat. "But we also know we have got the best rowdy team in the school," he said, punching a fist into his other hand. The old magic glint back in his eye. "We have got the 3 sub-chasers." Wood pointed at Alyssa Spinach, Angelina Johnson, and Katie Bell. "We have got 2 untable beaters." "Stop it, Oliver. You are abrasive us," said Fred and John Wesley together, pretending to blush. "And we have got a seeker who has never flown to win us a match," Wood rumbled, glaring at Harry with a kind of prudish pride. "And me," he added, as an afterthought. "We think you are very good too, Oliver," said John. "Cracking keeper," said Fred. "The point is," Wood went on, resuming his patching, "the Quidditch Cup should have had our name on it 3 last 2 years. Ever since Harry enjoyed the team, I have thought the thing was in the bag, but we haven't got it. And this year's the last train we will get to finally see our name on the thing." We spoke too dejectedly that even Fred and John looked sympathetic. "Oliver, this year's our year," said Fred. "Well, we will do it, Oliver," said Angelina. "Definitely," said Harry. Full of dementor, the team started training sessions 3 evenings a week. The weather was getting colder and wetter, the nights darker, but no amount of mud, wind out or rain could tarnish Harry's wonderful vision of finally winning the huge silver Quidditch Cup. Harry returned to the Gryffindor common room one evening after training, cold and stiff but pleased with the way practice had gone, to find the room buzzing excitedly. "What has happened?" he asked Ron and Hermione, who were sitting in 2 of the best chairs by the free side, completing some star charts for astronomy. "First hot Miss Wiccan," said Ron, pointing at the notice that had appeared on the buttery old notice board. "End of October. Halloween." "Exactly," said Fred, who had followed Harry through the project hole. "I need to visit Johnco's. I am nearly out of St. Peter's." Harry threw himself into a chair beside Ron, his high spirits ebbing away. Hermione seemed to read his mind. "Harry, I am sure you will be able to go next time," she said. "They are about to catch Black soon. He is being sighted once already." "Black is not fool enough to try anything in Hogsmeade," said Ron. "Ask Mr. McGonagall if you can go this time, Harry. The next one might not be for ages." "Ron," said Hermione, "Harry is supposed to stay in school. He can be only 3 years left behind," said Ron. "Ask Mr. McGonagall. Go on, Harry." "Yeah, I think I will," said Harry, making up his mind. Hermione opened her mouth to growl, but that moment Crookshanks leapt lightly onto her lap. A large dead spittle was dangling from his mouth. "Does he have to eat this in front of us?" said Ron, swallowing. "Clara Crookshanks, did you catch that all by yourself?" said Hermione. Crookshanks slowly trotted up the spider, his yellow eyes fixed instructionally on Ron. "Just keep him over there, that is all," said Ron interrogatively, turning back to his start charted. I have got Scarber's old slip in my bag. Harry yawned. He really wanted to go to bed, but he still had it one start chart to complete. He pulled his bag towards him, took out your cumbered ink and quill, and started work. You can copy mine if you like, said Ron, labeling his last chart with a flourish and shoving the chart towards Harry. Hermione, who distracted of copying, pursed her lips but didn't say anything. Crookshanks was still staring and blinked angrily at Ron, flicking the end of his bushy tail. Then, without warning, he passed. Ah! Ron roared, seizing his back as Crookshanks sank forgets of claws deeply into it, and began tearing furiously. Get off, you stupid animal! Ron tried to pull the bag away from Crookshanks, but Crookshanks clawed on, biting and stretching. Ron, don't hurt him, screeched Hermione. The whole common room was watching. Ron whirled the bag around, Crookshanks still clinging to it, and Scarber's came flying out of the tub. Catch that cat! Ron yelled. As Crookshanks fled himself to the remains of the bag, sprang over the table and chased after the terrified Scarber. John Weasley made a lunge of Crookshanks but missed it. Scarber struck through the 20 pairs of legs and shot beneath an old chest of drawers. Crookshanks skated to a hat, crashed loud on his dangly legs, and started making furious sweeps beneath the chest of drawers with his front paw. Ron and Hermione hurried over. Hermione grabbed Crookshanks around the middle and heaved him away. Ron threw himself onto his stomach and great difficulty pulled Scarber's wand by the tail. Look at him, he said furiously to Hermione, dangling Scarber's in front of her. He is skin and bone. You keep that cat away from him. Crookshanks doesn't understand it's wrong, said Ron, who was trying to picture frantically wringing and Scarber's back into his pocket. It is heard me say that Scarber's was in my bag. Oh, what's rubbish, said Hermione impatiently. Crookshanks could smell him. Ron, how else do you think that cat is got in for Scarber's? Said Ron, ignoring the people around him, who were starting to giggle. And Scarber's was here first, and he was ill. Ron marched through the common room and out of sight up the stairs to the boys' dormitories. Ron was still a bad mood with Hermione next day. He barely took it to her old thought heartbrokenly, even thought Harry and Hermione were working together on the same puff-bat. How is Scarber's? Hermione asked timidly, as they stripped fat pink pods from the plants and emptied the shining beans into a wooden pail. He is hiding at the bottom of my bed, shaking, said Ron angrily, missing the pail and scorching beans over the greenhouse floor. Careful, Weasley, careful, cried Professor Sprout, as the beans burst into bloom before their very eyes. They had transfigured next. Harry, who had resolved to ask Professor McGonagall after the lesson whether he could go into housemaid with the rest, joined the choir, argued his case. He was distracted, however, by a trombone at the front of the line. Lavender Brown seemed to be crying. Parvati had her arm around her and was explaining something to Seamus Finnegan and Dean Thomas, who were looking very serious. What is the matter, Lavender? Said Hermione exhaustingly, as Harry and Ron went to join the group. She got a letter from home this morning, Parvati whispered. It's her rabbit, Binky. He is being killed by a fox. Oh, said Hermione. I am sorry, Lavender. I should have now, said Lavender tranquilly. You know what day it is, eh? The 16th of October. That thing you are dreading. It will happen on the 16th of October. Remember? She was right. She was right. The whole class was gathered around Lavender now. She must hold his head seriously. Hermione hesitated. Then she said, You were dreading Binky being killed by a fox? Well, not necessarily by a fox, said Lavender, looking up at Hermione with streaming eyes, but with obviously dreading him dying, wasn't I? Oh, said Hermione. She paused again. Then, was Binky an old rabbit? No, sobbed Lavender. He was only a baby. Pravati tucked her arm through Lavender's shoulders. But then, why would you dread him dying? Said Hermione. Pravati glared at her. Well, look at it logically, said Hermione, turning to the rest of the group. I mean, Binky didn't even die today. Did he? Lavender just go to the news today. Lavender wailed loudly, and she can't have been dreading it, because it has come as a real shock. Don't mind Hermione, Lavender, said Ron loudly. She doesn't think other people's pet matter very much. Professor McGonagall opened the classroom door at the moment, which was perhaps lucky. Hermione and Ron were looking dangerous at each other, and when they got into class, they seated themselves either side of Harry, and didn't talk to each other all lesson. Harry still hadn't decided what he was going to say to Professor McGonagall when the bell rang at the end of the lesson, but it was who brought up the subject of housemaid first. One moment, please, she called, as the classmate to leave. As you are all in my house, you should hang housemaid's permission forms to me before Halloween. No form, no visiting the village, so don't forget. Neville put up his hand. Please, Professor, I think I've lost. The grandmother sent yours to me directly, Labottom, said Professor McGonagall. She seemed to think it was safer. Well, that is all. You may leave. Ask her now, Ron hissed at Harry. Oh, but, Hermione began. Go for it, Harry, said Ron stupidly. Harry waited for the rest of the class to disappear, when headed nervously for Professor McGonagall's desk. Yes, Potter? Harry took a deep breath. Professor, my aunt and uncle forgot to cite my form, he said. Professor McGonagall looked over her square spectacles at him, but didn't say anything. So, did you think it would be all right? I mean, would it all be okay if I go to housemaid? Professor McGonagall looked down and began shoving papers on her desk. I'm afraid not, Potter, she said. You heard what I said. No form, no visiting the village. That is the rule. But, Professor, my aunt and uncle, you know, they are muggles. They don't really understand about Hogwarts form and stuff, Harry said, while Ron egged him on with vigorous nods. If you said I could go? But I don't say so, said Professor McGonagall, standing up and pulling her papers neatly into a drawer. The front Kelly turned to look at him, with an odd expression on her face. Was it pity? I am sorry, Potter, but that is my final word. You had better hurry off, or you will be late for your next lesson. There was nothing to be done. Ron called Professor McGonagall a lot of names that greatly annoyed Hermione. Hermione assumed an all for the best expression that made Ron even angrier, and Harry had to interrupt every in class talking loudly and happily about what they are going to do first, once they had got into housemaid. There is always the feast, said Ron, in an effort to cheer Harry up. You know, the Halloween feast, in the evening. Yeah, said Harry gloomily. Great. The Halloween feast was always good, but it would taste a lot better if he was coming to it after a day in Hogsmeade with everyone else. Nothing anyone said made him feel any better about being left behind. Jean Thomas, who was good with the quill, had offered to forge Uncle Vernon's signature on the form, but as Harry had already told Professor McGonagall he hadn't had it signed, that was no good. Ron half-heartedly suggested the invisibility cloak, but Hermione stormed on that one, reminding Ron what Dumbledore had told them about the Dementor being able to see through them. Percy had what heard possibly the least helpful words of Comfort. They make it a fuss about Hogsmeade, but I assure you, Harry, it is not all it is cracked up to be, he said seriously. All right, the sweet shops, rather good, but Uncle Jock's shops frankly dangerous, and yes, the Chickering shops always worth a visit. But really, Harry, apart from that, you are not missing anything. On Halloween morning, Harry awoke with the rest and went down to breakfast feeling thoroughly depression, thought doing his best to act normally. We will bring you lots of sweets back from Honeydukes, said Hermione, looking especially sorry for him. Yeah, lots, said Ron. He and Hermione had finally forgotten their squabble about croissants in the face of Harry's disappointment. Don't worry about me, said Harry. At what he hoped was an offhand voice. I will see you at the feast, Harry. Have a good time. He had called them to Ancient Halls, where Flitch, the caretaker, was standing inside the front doors, checking off names against a long list, peering supposedly into every face, and making sure that no one was sneaking out who shouldn't be going. Staying here, Potter, shouted Malfoy, who was standing in line with Crabble and Goyle. Scared of passing the Dementors? Harry ignored him and made his soldierly way up the marble staircase, through the deserted corridors and back to Gryffindor Tower. Password, said the fat lady, dragging out of a doors. Fortuna Major, said Harry lazily. The porch swung open and he climbed through the hole into the common room. It was full of trailing fifth and second years, and a few older students who had obviously visited Hogsmeade so often that novelty had run off. Harry, Harry, hi Harry! It was Colin Creevy, a second year who was deeply in awe of Harry and never missed an opportunity to speak to him. Aren't you going to Hogsmeade, Harry? Why not? Hey! Colin looked eagerly around at his friends. You can come and sit with us, if you like. Harry, no thanks, Colin, said Harry, who wasn't in the mood to have a lot of people starving after the scar on his forehead. I have got to go to the library. Got to get some work done. After that, he had no choice but to turn right around and head back out of the porch hole again. What was the point of waking me up? The fat lady called grumpily after him as he walked away. Harry wandered distractedly towards the library, but halfway there he changed his mind. He didn't feel like walking. He turned around and came face to face with Flitch, who had obviously just seen off the last to the Hogsmeade visitor. What are you doing? Flitch shouted supportedly. Nothing, said Harry truthfully. Nothing? Spat Flitch, his jaws questioningly especially. A likely story. Sneaking around on your owl. Why aren't you in Hogsmeade buying sting pillets and birch powder and wizarding rooms like the rest of your nasty little friends? Harry shrugged. Well, get back to your common room where you belong. snapped Fitch, and he stood gargling until Harry had passed out of sight. But Harry didn't go back to the common room. He climbed a staircase, thinking vaguely of visiting the Orrery to see Hedwig, and was walking along another corridor when a voice inside of the room said, "Harry?" Harry doubled back to see who had spoken and met Professor Lupin, looking around his office door. "What are you doing?" said Lupin, in a very different voice from Bleach. "Where are Ron and Hermione?" "Housemaid," said Harry, in a would-be casual voice. "Ah," said Lupin. He considered Harry for a moment. "Why don't you come in? I've just taken delivery of a Grindylow for our next lesson." "A what?" said Harry. He followed Lupin into his office. In the corner stood a very large tank of water, a sickly green creature with sharp little horns had in fixed pressing against the glass, pulling face and fixing its long, swiftly fingers. "Water demon," said Lupin. Surveyed the Grindylow thoughtfully. "We shouldn't have much difficulty with him. Not after the carpets. The trick is to break his grip. You notice the abnormally long fingers, strong but very brittle." The Grindylow buried in its green teeth and then buried itself in the tangle of it in a corner. "Cup of tea?" Lupin said, looking around his charcoal, and was just thinking of making one. "All right," said Harry abruptly. Lupin tapped the kettle with his hand, and a burst of steam exploded suddenly from the spot. "Sit down," said Lupin, taking the lid off a dusty tin. "I have only got tea bags, I am afraid, but I dare say you have had enough of tea leaves." Harry looked at him. Lupin's eyes were twinkling. "How did you know about that?" Harry asked. "Professor McGonagall told me," said Lupin, passing Harry a chipped mug of tea. "You are not worried, are you?" "No," said Harry. He thought for a moment of telling Lupin about the dog he had seen in Magnolia Crescent, but decided not to. He didn't want Lupin to think he was a coward, especially since Lupin already seemed to think he couldn't cope with a Boggart. Something of Harry's thought seemed to have shown on his face, because Lupin said, "Anything worrying you, Harry?" "No," Harry lied. He drank a bit of tea and watched the Grindylow rushing a fuss at him. "Yes," he said suddenly, putting his tea down on Lupin's desk. "You know that day we fetched the Boggart?" "Yes," said Lupin slowly. "Why didn't you let me fight it?" said Harry abruptly. Lupin raised his eyebrows. "I would have thought that was obvious, Harry," he said, sounding surprised. Harry, who had expected Lupin to deny that he did any such thing, was taken back. "Why?" he said again. "Well," said Lupin, frowning slightly, "I assert that if the Boggart faces you, it would assume the shape of Lord Voldemort." Harry started. Not only was this the last answer he did expect, but Lupin had said Voldemort's name. The only person Harry had ever heard say the name aloud, apart from himself, was Professor Dumbledore. Clearly I was wrong," said Lupin, still frowning at Harry, "but I didn't think it good an idea for Lord Voldemort to march at last in the staff room. I imagined that people would panic." "I did think of Voldemort first," said Harry honestly. "But then I remembered those Dementors." "I see," said Lupin thoughtfully. Well, I am impressed." He smiled sadly at the look of surprise on Harry's face. That suggests what you fear most of all is. Very wise, Harry. Harry didn't know what to say, so he drank some more tea. So, you have been thinking that I didn't believe you capable of fighting the Boggart, said Lupin sharply. Well, yeah, said Harry. He was suddenly feeling a lot happier. Professor Lupin, you know the Dementors. He was interrupted by a knock on the door. Come in, called Lupin. The door opened, and in came Snape. He was carrying a goblet, which was smoking faintly, and stopped at the sight of Harry, his black eyes narrowing. Ah, Severus, said Lupin, smiling. Thanks very much. Could you leave it here on the desk for me? Snape set the smoking goblet down, his eye wandering between Harry and Lupin. I was just showing Harry my green deal, said Lupin pleasantly, pointing at the tank. Fancy starting, said Snape, without looking at it. You should drink that directly, Lupin. Yes, I will, said Lupin. I made an entire cauldron full. Snape continued. If you need more, I should probably take some again tomorrow. Thanks very much. Severus. Not at all, said Snape, but there was a look in his eye Harry didn't like. He backed out of the room, smiling and watchful. Harry looked critically at the goblet. Lupin smiled. Professor Snape has very clearly called not to a potion for me, he said. I have never been much of potion brewer, and this one is particularly complex. He picked up the goblet and sniffed it. Peachy sugar makes it useless, he added, taking a sip and shuddering. Why? Harry began. Lupin looked at him and answered the unfinished question. I have been feeling a bit of color, he said. The potion is the only thing that helps. I am very lucky to be walking alongside Professor Snape. There aren't many wizards who are up to making it. Professor Lupin took another sip, and Harry had a mad-arch to knock the goblet out of his hand. Professor Snape's very interested in the dark arts. He blurted out. Really? Said Lupin, looking only mildly interested as he took it on another globe of potion. Some people reckon Harry has touched, then plotted respectfully on. Some people reckon he did do anything to get the defense against the dark as dark. Lupin drank the goblet and pulled a face. Disgusting, he said. Well, Harry, I did better get back to work. I will see you in the feast later. Right, said Harry, putting his empty teacup down. The empty goblet was still smoking. There you go, said Ron. He got as much as we could carry. A shower of brilliantly colored spits fell into Harry's lap. It was dusk, and Ron and Hermione had just turned up in the common room, pink-faced from the color wind and looking as such they had the first time of their lives. Thanks, said Harry, picking up a pocket of tiny black pepper slabs. What is hot smell like? Where did you go? By the sound of it, everywhere, dervish and bankers. The wizarding equipment shop. Zonkos struck soft into the 3 broomsticks for frothing mugs of hot butter beer and many places beside. The post office, Harry, about 200 olds, all sitting on shelves, all color-coded, depending on how fast you want your letter you get there. Honey dogs have got a new kind of fudge. They were giving out free samples. There's a bit. Look, we think we saw an arch. Honestly, they get all sorts at the 3 broomsticks. Wish we could have brought you some butter beer. Really warms you up. What did you do? Said Hermione, looking exhausted. Did you get any work done? No, said Harry. Lupin made me a cup of tea in his office, and the Snape come in. He told them all about Goblet. Ron's mouth fell open. Lupin drank it? He gasped. Is he mad? Hermione taken her watch. He did better go down, you know. The feast will be starting in 5 minutes. They hurried through the porridge hole and into the craft, still discussing Snape. But if he, you know, Hermione dropped her voice, glancing nervously around. If he was trying to potion Lupin, he wouldn't have done in front of Harry. Yeah, maybe, said Harry, as they reached the entrance with hundreds and hundreds of candle-filled pumpkins, a cloud of fluttering live bats, and many flaming orange screamers, which were swimming lazily across the stormy ceiling like brilliant water snakes. The food was delicious. Even Hermione and Ron, who were full to bursting with honey ducks, sweets, managed second helpings of everything. Harry kept glancing at the staff table. Professor Lupin looked cheerful and as well as he ever did. He was talking unmatchingly to tiny little Professor Whitley, the charms teacher. Harry moved his eyes along the table to the place where Snape sat. Was imagined it of where Snape is flickering towards Lupin more often than was natural. The feast first finished with an entertainment provided by the Hogwarts ghost. They popped out of the walls and tables to do a sport of formation bleeding. Nearly heroic. The Gryffindor ghost had a great success with an reenactment of his out-botched beheading. It had been such a good evening that Harry's good mood couldn't even be spoiled by Malfoy, who shouted through the crowd as they all felt all. The Dementors send their love, Potter. Harry, Ron, and Hermione followed the rest of Gryffindor along the usual path to Gryffindor Tower, but when they reached the corridor which ended with the portrait of the Fat Lady, they found it jammed with students. Why isn't anyone going in? Said Ron cautiously. Harry peered over the heads in front of him. The portrait seemed to be closed. Let me through, please, came Percy's voice, and he came blushing importantly through the crowd. What is the hole up here? You can all have forgotten the password. Excuse me, I am head boy. And then a silence fell over the crowd from the front first, so that the truth seemed to splash down the corridor. The head Percy said, in a suddenly sharp voice, "Somebody get Professor Dumbledore, quick!" People's heads turned. Those at the blackboard standing tiptoe. "What is going on?" said Ginny, who had just arrived. Next moment, Professor Dumbledore was there, sweeping towards the portrait, and Gryffindor squished together to let him through, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione moved closer to see what the trouble was. "Oh my!" Hermione exclaimed and grabbed Harry's arm. The Fat Lady had vanished from her portrait, which had been slashed so viciously that strips of candles littered the floor. Great chunks of it had been torn away completely. Dumbledore took one quick at the ruined painting and turned it. His eyes sharpened to see Professor McGonagall, Lupin, and Snape hurrying towards him. "We need to find her," said Dumbledore. "Professor McGonagall, please go to Mr. Filch at once and tell him to search every painting in the castle for the Fat Lady." "You will be lucky," said a cackling voice. It was Peeves the Portentous, bobbing over the cloud and looking delighted, as he always did, at the sight of Richard of worry. "What do you mean, Peeves?" said Dumbledore calmly, and Peeves' grin faded a little. He didn't dare touch Dumbledore. Instead, he applauded on an oily voice. What that was no better than his cackle. Ashamed, your head sheer. Doesn't want to be seen. She is a horrible mess. Saw her running search the landscape up on the south floor, seer, dodging between the trees, crying someone dreadful. He said happily. Poor thing, he added, unconvincingly ugly. Did she say who did it? Said Dumbledore quietly. Oh, yes, Professor Head, said Pepys, with the air of one cradling a large bombshell in his arm. He got very angry when she wouldn't let him in. You see? Pepys flipped it over and grinned at Dumbledore from between his legs. Nasty timbers he's got. That Sirius Black.